you have to first be vulnerable with yourself before you can be vulnerable with someone else.
Yeah.
If you can't sit with yourself in all your mess, and you can't look at yourself and have conversations with yourself and be vulnerable with that, you're never going to be able to give it away. If you can't give it to yourself, you're not giving it to somebody else.
Thinkless. What are we not thinking enough about? Join us as we evaluate our thought life. I'm Parker, and I'm here with my co-host, Amber. Welcome to the show. We just spent the last 15 minutes talking about things that are happening, talking about things that are going on, talking about tough things, but real things.
Yeah.
And that's a vulnerable space to be in. But I think also that's the foundation for healing too.
Yeah.
Because today we're talking about vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be vulnerable because there's an opening of ourselves, and there's an opening of wounds, and there's an opening of pain, and it's an opening process.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like vulnerability is the I don't know why this analogy just came to my head.
This is going to be good.
This is probably not going to be good.
This is going to be great.
It's not going to be good, but this is what came to my mind.
Okay,
so my wife and I, we have this specific pizza place that we love to go to, and my son loves to go to it. My son's name is Saint, and he is the coolest little kid in the world. I love him so much. Adorable. But he loves the claw machine, you know, where it moves around and picks up specific things. And he won this little bear. And the restaurant is called Center Court Pizza and Brew.
Oh, yeah. We have one up here.
Oh, we do?
In our area.
You do?
Yeah,
okay.
That's crazy.
Okay. Well, I thought it was native to where I am in South Houston area.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we all know the claw machines. It's like, on Toy Story when it's like the claw, it's like that whole thing. But I don't know why. I just kind of got that picture of whenever I'm sharing something like vulnerable, it's like that claw that's like going and like picking the thing that I'm being vulnerable up and prying it out of what it was sitting in. And so that picture just came. Once again, that's probably not a good analogy at all.
No.
But I was just thinking, I was like, man, it like that it hurts to be vulnerable, and that claw, like, it goes down and it picks the thing, picks the pain point, and it brings it up so that it can be aired and so that it can be open and seen, and that just doesn't feel good.
And I think there's two things in vulnerability. One, in order to have vulnerability, there has to be safety.
Yeah.
There has to be security and safety to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Two, vulnerability for me, now where I sit, is freeing to be vulnerable. Yeah. When you're vulnerable, I think you're probably the closest to being your most authentic self that you are. And in society, we try to put on a persona that's like the imposter syndrome, right? To not be vulnerable, because what if people don't like me at the truth version of myself? What would I do? And I think when you've lived through the different things in life, I mean, we all have got past,
We've all got stuff.
We've all got stuff. We've all been through hard things. I think I've been through my fair share of hard things that I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where I shouldn't say I don't care whether you like me at my most vulnerable space or not. Let's just say I don't put weight on the opinions of others anymore like I used to. Yeah. I would rather live free and vulnerable than I would live caged and pretending. And they can't live in the same area. Yeah. And I just don't want to pretend anymore. Yeah. And I think that's where that in itself is being vulnerable. That in itself is saying, I had a conversation with somebody this morning, and she just said, thank you so much for sharing that hard stuff with me today and entrusting me with that. And I said, I have not done that
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah.
Shared some of the harder parts of my life with others because I couldn't trust.
Yeah.
But in order to trust, I will have to give away trust and vulnerability. I will have to become vulnerable, which causes me to have to trust another human being.
Yeah.
And they also live in the same space. Safety, security, trust, and vulnerability all live in the same dormitory, so to speak.
Yeah.
They all live in the same area.
Yeah.
You separate them, it's extremely hard to do them. Like all isolated. You can't have fear and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You can't have, no trust at all and be vulnerable. If you think about it.
Sincere vulnerability.
Sure.
Because I think even for me, I was vulnerable to a certain level with people, and even one of my responsibilities now, like in the position that I sit in now, as a pastor, like it's the weird thing sometimes that comes up within me with like, how vulnerable can I be with so there's this core group of guys that I do life with, that our wives are friends. We're all friends, couple friends, and we all have kids, and kids play together, and it's great. It's fun. Yeah. These guys are awesome. These guys are really becoming like my dudes. Yeah. And which is amazing because I feel like for the past several years as a pastor and in some of the different spaces that I'm in, it's like, well, to what degree can I be vulnerable with like, hey, like my wife and I are having a hard time right now. Yeah. And for them to not see me, well, like he's one of our pastors, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So it's this weird, this weird thing, but also like in that though, I'm finding these guys that I can be vulnerable with, that I can say, hey guys, like I'm struggling today. Like I don't want to be at church. Can I say that? Like not even just here, but like with the guys that I'm with, like, hey, like right now, man, I don't want to be here. Yeah. I don't want to be here. Yeah. And it's not because I don't like it. It's not because I don't like the people. It's just
tough today.
It's tough today.
It's just a tough day.
Exactly.
Like, at what point
tired.
can you just say it's
and
tough?
Yes. And it's not like I feel like I have to put on a show. Like I really do feel like I'm living authentically in me with who I am. But still, it's like, okay, I'm finding that when I can be vulnerable with these guys, because I'll speak to this here in a second, but it can feel like I'm being weak. When I'm being vulnerable.
You're exposed.
Yes. And I didn't have a model growing up so much of a man. And I'll say once again, a model in a man of what it looks like to be vulnerable and honest and to admit when they're wrong and to say, hey, I'm so sorry. I didn't see a marriage like that growing up. And so I didn't know what it looked like, let alone in my marriage, let alone just as a man. Yeah. Like, what does it mean to open up and be vulnerable? Yeah. Because it can be easy to have a surface level vulnerability where it's like, man, today's a tough day. Man, just not feeling it. Well, that's surface. Yeah. Like, well, why is today not? Yeah. Why do you not feel it today? Well, it's because my wife and I, we fought last night, and feel like we're not connecting right now, and I don't know why. Yeah. And I don't know how to fix it. And I don't know how to fix it.
I don't know how to fix it. And I just want to fix it, and I just want to make it better, but I don't know what to do to make it better. And I feel like it's going to keep going. Like you just to be real with your thoughts and not be judged for your thoughts. Yes. That's where safety is. Yes. That's where safety is. That's where trust lives. Mm-hmm. And if in order to be that vulnerable, that environment has to be there. I think that's the key thing for raising kids. If you're raising kids and every time they do something wrong, you throw the gauntlet at them. Yeah. Like, why'd you do that? Get to your room. You're grounded. You're this, you're that. And it's not like, I'm sorry. That has to let's just take this. If you were to mess up today and you were to go home and be like, man, I ran the red light. I don't know what it is. Like you did something stupid, right? And you're like, and you feel bad. Or you did something at work. You're like, man, I shouldn't have sent this email, but I was frustrated and I sent it anyways. And I know it hurt Bob's feelings or whatever. I know I shouldn't have done that. And you go home and you tell your spouse that and she's like, you idiot. why would you do that?
Yeah.
And then just hound you?
Yeah.
You're like, whoa.
Yeah. Well,
whoa, I'm not doing that again.
Exactly.
I'm not doing that again.
Yep.
So that's the same in raising kids.
Yeah.
You think they're going to come talk to you about their mess ups and their failures, to be vulnerable again, to bare their little hearts to you, if you just land past them as soon as, or your spouse or any of that, instead of like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
I sat next to this man on the plane. This was incredible. I sat next to this man on the plane, and he ran a company worth he took the company public and was worth $900 million. And we didn't know that till the very, 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 we're getting off the plane. And he's like, hey, and he tells me a little bit about his life, but we were just talking life.
Yeah.
And we were talking about running businesses and running employees and family and balance and just all of that.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, Amber, life is really hard as a successful man running a business in all the things that are thrown at you on top of raising kids in a marriage, you know. And he said, and I made a mistake. And I, you know, had gone outside my marriage and made a mistake. And he goes, I went to my wife and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just walked the door and he's like, I messed up. I've made a mistake. I'm terrible. I feel terrible and all that. And he said, she grabbed my face and grabbed both my cheeks. And she said, what is going on inside there? And he said, because she saw me and not my mistake, it all changed. And in that vulnerability to sit with somebody in their most vulnerable place and be safe and not judge and not condemn or point the finger or whatever is really hard to do. But when you can, I believe miracles happen.
Yeah.
Transformation happens. Growth happens. I mean, closeness happens. Intimacy happens. Yeah. There's so much good if we can sit in people's vulnerability with them in a healthy kind of way.
Yeah.
And I think true vulnerability looks different than you're just spilling the beans because you're just talking a lot, right? Like you're just spilling the beans because you just need somebody to cry to. For sure. That's totally different.
And
that's not.
And you want to be heard.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's because I know of several people, you know, and obviously I'm not gonna mention names, but I know of several people that like it actually can be a sign or a cry for help.
Yeah.
Of like I'm actually really struggling.
Yeah.
And
for certain.
But like I'm just gonna air everything because I'm almost like I almost don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna blurt it out. I'm gonna vomit.
Yeah.
And that communicates to me more of like insecurity, like coming like rising to the surface, which is ultimately pride. I mean, insecurity and pride, they go hand in hand.
Together, yeah.
But also where maybe they don't have a safe space.
Yeah.
To whenever it's blurred, everyone's blurting out and vomiting out all of these deep things where it's like, yes, I'm grateful that maybe you are being vulnerable, but is this the space to be vulnerable? So maybe they see any sign of health as the space to be vulnerable rather than recognizing, do I actually have a space? In other words, a person or a couple people or a spouse or a friend or a mom or a dad. And so that's been a sign for me of whenever there's comfortability per se to vomit all of the things happening to large audiences or whatever. Maybe
that's when therapy needs to come in play.
Yes.
And that is, I mean, obviously I was a therapist for a long time. I'm a big believer in it for a couple of reasons. One, it does provide that space.
Yes.
Maybe you don't have that space. And we all need that space to process through our emotions in our life and scenarios and situations. So it allows you to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is something I believe you have to practice. I don't think it is, like just natural for everybody.
No.
Because some people have grown up their entire life and never had a safe place to be vulnerable, and then required to be vulnerable in marriage.
Yeah. It's like, how do I do that?
Like, what is that? Like, I don't even, or they have a child, and now you've got to be vulnerable with the child. Like as a dad, you can't like tell the kid you're going to beat him his whole life at everything because he's got to know what it's like. I'm not going to let him win. You're like, wait, he's 2. Like, of course you're going to win.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know there's not even a competition. Like, that's not even real. Like, the fact that you see that as real tells me your ability to be vulnerable and authentic and humble. So, no. Yeah, no. You never had the freedom to be that yourself, and you just don't even know how to do that. Yeah. I encourage people to read books. Get into a safe place where you can learn how to be vulnerable with someone.
What would be a step? Like, I know reading books. I mean, we've got a couple books here that we can reference. Yeah. And I mean, great. Dr. Brené Brown is brilliant just when it comes to like vulnerability and courage and shame and connection. And so, I mean, even just like this book that I'm holding here is called The Gifts of Imperfection, and the book that you're holding there is
Rising Strong.
Yeah. And so both of these are, I mean, incredible resources to understand what it means to be vulnerable and understand the power of it. But I would just ask the question, to practice it, obviously doesn't mean just digesting and internalizing content or information, but of course the application of it. And so what would you say would be a step to practice?
It's funny because in this chapter with Brené in the very beginning, she says we can't engineer an emotional vulnerability and a courageous process into a one-size-fits-all formula. She says, I've seen the process take 20 minutes and I've seen the process take 20 years. And that's, if I go to grief and I look at, a lot of times you'll say you can only counsel at the speed of grief because everybody can move through, they say there's 8 stages of grief, but everybody moves through those 8 stages at different speeds, times, relapse, go back, hits another one, comes back. I mean, it's just vulnerability is at the speed of the will of the person to go there. I too, like Brené, I have seen forgiveness and vulnerability happen like that. Yeah. And in my experience, because my faith is so important to me, like an encounter with the Lord changes everything. And you can move. But if we're looking at just a daily discipline in it, is you have to first be vulnerable with yourself before you can be vulnerable with someone else. Yeah. If you can't sit with yourself in all your mess, and you can't look at yourself and have conversations with yourself and be vulnerable with that, you're never going to be able to give it away. If you can't give it to yourself, you're not giving it to somebody else.
That's so hard though.
It is so hard.
Because, I mean, in saying it could take 20 minutes or 20 years, but it's like even giving ourselves that space, that margin to, like, that's why I think busyness is just so rampant.
Medicated.
Medicated. Exactly.
It's medication.
It's like, I don't want to feel it that.
Works.
So I'm going to, totally.
Totally works.
It does. And it's so easy to slap a medication on something rather than actually feeling the things of like, oh man, like that sucks and that hurts and that's painful and
just do it. It's like you can't have an open wound cut, which vulnerability takes an openness. You can't have an open wound and then like pack it full of a whole bunch of dirt and grime and then put a Band-Aid on it and then be like, that doesn't exist. That's done.
Exactly.
Like that doesn't, it's going to rot off.
Yeah.
Something's going to die.
Yeah, for sure.
Something is going to rot away and die. over time. What the death is, I don't know. I don't know if it's a death of a marriage. I don't know if it's a death of a relationship. I don't know if it's a death of a career, a dream, of what the death is, but something will not foster good from it. I do know that.
Yeah.
So it's better to sit in the pain and work through, squirt it out with water, clean it out. It hurts like some kind of bad. Just clean it out. Do that so that it can heal. Otherwise, you just keep the fester and you think that it's gone away, but it's not. It's ultimately killing something along the way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to help yourself be vulnerable, it's little bits at a time.
Yeah.
You know, and to be honest, Parker, I mean, if I'm throwing it all on the table, I don't know how you get to this place without knowing my best friend.
Yeah.
Without knowing Jesus, I think it's extremely hard because where do you get the healing from? Where do you get the forgiveness from to give back away?
Yeah.
I mean, so many things happen to us in our lifetimes that are just not good, not right, not fair.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
You know, you feel unjust for, like, all of that. Well, nobody's going back and righting those wrongs.
Well, I think the healing, maybe to kind of speak to that, the healing could maybe be more just intellectually of just like maybe, well, I understand something like cognitively, or philosophically or psychologically, you know, I understand, to answer that question of like, where do you receive the healing from? Like people could maybe just understand it here, but not understanding it from a true experiential
and
place.
I guess because I've sat with such pain in people that there is no rationale.
Yeah.
Like there's you cannot rationalize the pain and the things that have happened to some people in this world.
Yeah.
And so if you're leaning just on that, you'll never find an answer.
Yeah.
You will have to have something supernatural.
Yeah.
That loves you beyond your comprehension.
Totally.
To come in, and he is the maker of the heart.
Yeah.
And he is the only one that's the mender of the heart. Even when my kids were little. And, you know, I mean, the things that happen on the playground and at school and blah, blah, blah. I mean, is your son in school yet, or preschool or daycare or anything?
He goes to a Montessori school.
A little Montessori.
Yeah,
And so little things happen at school, and they come home and they tell you about it, and you want to go sock the little kid. It's fine, but
my kid is the
one
one that's socking the little kids. So yeah.
You're like, which one took your toy?
Yeah,
I'll tell you what next time I show up there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's But you have to when we'd go to sleep at night, we were saying our prayers. I prayed the same thing over them. Lord, mend their heart like only you can mend their heart. Where their heart has been broken or damaged today, Lord, I just ask that you go into their heart and you mend and heal their heart to the way that you created it and made it to be. Let it function wholeheartedly, focused on you, Lord, every single day. And Lord, I pray for their emotions, that their emotions get in alignment with who you are and not what has been done to them or what has been told to them, but who you are, Lord. I pray those emotions over them. Because in order for them to ultimately get healing and be able to be vulnerable, they're going to have a safe place. They're going to have to find a way to get to a healing whole place, you know, and sometimes the bad things that happen to us in our life don't make sense.
Yes.
And if vulnerability depended upon whether we understood situations or not, or healing depended on whether we understood situations or not, like I'm out. I don't understand so much of the bad in this world other than it's sin, right?
Absolutely.
Which is irrational behavior, saying that you cannot rationalize sin in this world.
Yeah.
And finding a way to mentally, like you're saying, mentally set in some disciplines, which I say is taking thoughts captive.
Yeah.
And start saying, I'm not going to believe this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to partner with this anymore in my mind. I'm going to say this is truth in my life.
Yeah.
This is not truth in my life.
Yeah.
You know, and that's being able to be vulnerable with yourself of like, maybe you had a bad childhood and your parents were not right to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so in your mind, you deal with a lot of bad thoughts about your parents. It's so unfair. I should have had this. I should have had that. I could have been this if I had had parents that did this.
Yeah.
Like all of those things at some point, when you sit with yourself long enough, you have to say, I'm a grown adult now. I have choices. And so what? I didn't have parents that helped me, but I can't stay in those thoughts.
Yes.
I've got to change out of those thoughts and be vulnerable with myself to say, this has held me back.
Yeah.
The way I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But you got to be willing to see that in yourself.
Yeah.
You got to be able to, you have to be willing to say, you know what? I want to love my kids in a way that I didn't have, like you were saying. I didn't have those things. That's a vulnerability for you to assess yourself.
Yep.
You know, that's you being vulnerable with you.
Yep.
Therefore, you can be vulnerable with somebody else.
Yep.
But if you can't have those self-evaluating thoughts that like, I didn't have parents, I didn't have a good example, I don't know what I'm doing, I want to know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I'm doing, help me learn those things, and what can I do to do that? Read a book. Like, how many books have you read? Like, a lot.
A lot.
Same. Because at some point in my life, I was like, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I want to do better at this job.
Yep.
Which is being a wife and a parent to my kids, right?
Yep.
So I need to, and I want to be a better human.
Yes.
Like, it's just in myself.
Yeah.
Every day I want to be a better person. And just that alone, sitting with myself to say, man, I missed the mark quite a bit on some things.
Well, there's a healing process for others when I can be open and heal in front of others too. 100%. So because I think it just gives people the freedom and the space to, that's what I was kind of saying about the group of guys. It's like, man, I've seen that the more open I am, the more open they are.
Yep.
But someone has had to lead the way with openness and candor and vulnerability to say, hey guys, like, is anybody else, like from a pastor's perspective, does anybody else struggle with understanding like concepts in the Bible? I mean, that's a very simple example, but I mean, and everyone's like, yeah, I thought I was the only one. And it's like, oh, you're one of our pastors and you're saying this? Like, oh, like, then we can have honest dialogue about it rather than thinking that, oh, well, because I'm a pastor, I understand everything. It's not the truth. But also kind of taking it with our children, it's like, because I never saw that example with, my father or other men of just like, of being honest whenever they messed up, of recognizing areas that they can grow in and seeing like them take steps to grow in those areas. I'm like, okay, well, I'm a very different individual than my dad was. And so it's like, okay, well, I want to be very honest with my son, Saint, and my daughter, Margot, to say, hey, like, dad messed up. And like, it's okay to mess up because we mess up. And even there have been several times already where I have like brought Saint into the room because Zoe, my wife, and I were kind of having an argument or something, or we kind of reacted towards each other. And I brought him into the room and I said, hey, like, I want you to see dad apologize to your mom because dad was wrong. Dad was wrong. And it's okay to be wrong because all of us, we're all going to mess up. And so Saint, it's okay to be wrong. And then I apologize to my wife in front of my son so that he can see his dad like model vulnerability, because I want him to get that concept that like we apologize if we do something wrong, but also we own it too. And we recognize that, no, I messed up. It was my fault and I'm sorry. Or I'm struggling with this, like once again, my son is 2. Right. So he's 2. So, I mean, can he really understand this? No, he can't understand this intellectually, but if he sees it modeled now, it's one of those things. It's like, I'm not going to, well, until he can understand it, I'll start modeling it. It's like, well, then I probably won't model it then if I'm not modeling it now.
Correct.
So it's like, well, I want to bring him into that now. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like while it's hard to be vulnerable, obviously it's a process of healing. Yeah. It's a process of healing. And it starts with me simply being honest to saying, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I'm sorry. Or hey, will you forgive me? And the more comfortable I can get with doing that, the more healing I have, absolutely, but also the more freedom I'm living in, and the more I'm probably willing to be open with the things that I'm wrestling with and the things that I'm struggling with. So I just feel like it's this beautiful process that the more I do it, the more healing I have and the more comfortable I am with not being okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, nobody ever wants to not be okay.
Yeah.
But we don't stay there.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of it. If you don't want to be not okay, then you have to get to a place of vulnerability to move past it.
Yes.
To move. So I'm quick to want to go like, dude, let's just lay it all out. Let's just get vulnerable.
Yep.
Because I know in vulnerability in a healthy way, you move on.
Yeah.
You go on. Without it, what I'll always say, without humility and vulnerability, you don't have repentance. Without repentance, you don't have restoration. So I'm always in hunt for restoration and solutions.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be stuck in something.
Yeah.
I don't want to be stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't want a thorn that just festers. Let's just go ahead. Nobody wants to pull the thing out. Nobody wants to do all that.
Let's pull it out.
Yeah, get rid of it. I'm like, I've learned in my life, like I'd rather just let's get it out. Let's go through the hard. And that's what I'll say to people when they came to counsel. I would say, how willing are you right now to work at this? Because that's going to determine how fast we go and how much progress we have.
Yeah.
It's not going to be because I didn't do my job.
Yeah.
I'm going to deliver you tools and truths and all the things for you to do it. But if you don't do it.
Yeah. I am in charge of my own healing.
Yeah.
Really.
You don't go anywhere.
It's like, yeah.
It's like I can only take you to the gym, but I can't make you lift a weight.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean,
it's like,
you can't go like, why am I not a bodybuilder yet? Well, we just went and stood in there.
Yes.
That's why. I mean, it doesn't osmosisly happen to you. You got to do the work.
Yeah.
You have to have a willingness to say, I will do whatever it takes for this healing.
Yeah.
I can't want health or healing for you more than you want it for yourself.
Correct.
And that's the hard part in marriage. If you're in a hard marriage, that one person can want wholeness and health and want to do the work. But if the other one does it, I call it donkeying in the road.
Yeah. They
just sit down, park the bus, and you're stuck there. You cannot move forward. Then decisions have to be made. So as much as my faith is important to me, I have said in marriage, if you don't have two willing vessels, it's really hard to say whether somebody should stay or not in the marriage. I mean, you can't force somebody to be willing to do right and be vulnerable and have restoration and healing or whatever through things. And so I think that's a timely thing with you and in the Lord and walking out those things. But that's the only relationship I know of that you're hindered by someone else, because it's the only relationship you're tied to. I mean, with your kids, you forever are their parent, but whether they donkey in the road or not doesn't really hold you up. Whether you do doesn't really hold them up. But in marriage, you're tied together. It's the only thing. That's why that's the true picture of the Trinity. So vulnerability is a must to have healing in relationships. Vulnerability is a must. Start with yourself and be able to have that with yourself so that you're able to give that to others. So today I would ask, when was the last time you had a vulnerable conversation with yourself?
That's a good question.
And what derives, I would say write it. If you ask yourself today, okay, I'm going to have a real vulnerable conversation with myself, then I'm going to say, where am I actually right now within myself? Am I whole? Am I healthy? Do I have pains? Do I have hurts? Ask yourself the questions. And write them out. And then you have decisions to make about them, and work to doing them. Find a good place, a good safe place that you can be vulnerable with a friend. Like for you, it's your guys group. Maybe it's your workout class. Maybe there's somebody you work out with. Maybe it's somebody that you could grab coffee with. Maybe it's a coworker, an aunt, uncle, cousin, relative. Find somebody that you could call and say, hey, where's a safe place? If not, find a therapist that you can be safe with.
Absolutely.
But it's great important to learn vulnerability.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of THINKLESS. We release an episode every Wednesday morning, so be sure to like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. It would mean so much. We appreciate you. Thank you.